Witduda. I think it's important to consider all the options before making a decision.
I couldn't breathe when she said it. The words hung in the air like smoke you can't wave away. "Sleep with me tonight," she whispered, her voice soft but steady, like she'd rehearsed it in her head 1,000 times. My friend's stepmom, 50 years old, elegant, untouchable, stood there, her hand still on the door knob she just clicked shut. I was 25, barely figuring out my own life. And now this. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not in that house, not with her. Not after everything I'd been through to keep my head above water. I'd known her for years, seen her at family dinners, laughed at her sharp wit, admired how she carried herself like she owned every room. But this was a line I didn't know how to cross, or if I even wanted to. Her eyes locked on mine, not pleading, not desperate, but expectant. Like she knew something about me I hadn't admitted to myself. I stood frozen, my mind screaming one question. What do you do when someone you're not supposed to want says something you're not supposed to hear? My palms were sweaty, my throat dry, and the silence between us was louder than any words. I'd come over to help my friend move some furniture, not to end up in a moment that could ruin everything. She wasn't just his stepmom. She was a woman who'd always seemed untouchable, like a painting you admire but never dare touch. And yet here we were alone in her guest room, the door locked, her words sinking into me like a stone in still water. I wanted to run. I wanted to stay. I wanted to know why she'd chosen me of all people to say this to. But most of all, I wanted to know what I'd do next. Because whatever I chose, there was no going back. I've known my friend Jake since we were kids, back when we'd spend summers biking until the streetlights flickered on. His dad remarried when we were 16, and that's when Eleanor came into the picture. She was different from anyone I'd met. Sharp, poised, with this quiet intensity that made you feel seen and small at the same time. She wasn't the warm cookie-baking type. No, Eleanor was the kind of woman who'd sip wine at dinner and ask you questions that cut straight to your core, like she could see through whatever mask you were wearing. Jake adored her, called her his cool stepmom, and I got it. She had this way of making you feel like you mattered, even when she barely said a word. By the time I was 25, life had thrown me some curveballs. I dropped out of college, picked up a job at a warehouse, and was trying to figure out who I was when everyone else seemed to have it together. Jake was the opposite. Steady job, steady girlfriend, steady life. He'd move back home to save money, and I'd swing by their place sometimes to hang out, play video games, or help with whatever project his dad had going. Eleanor was always there in the background, her presence like a low hum you couldn't ignore. She'd catch my eye sometimes, hold it a second too long, and I'd tell myself I was imagining things. I mean, she was 50, married my friend's stepmom. What else was I supposed to think? That night, Jake had asked me to come over to help move some old furniture from their guest room to the garage. His dad was out of town for work, and Jake had to leave early for a shift. "Eleanor will let you in," he'd said, casual as ever. I didn't think twice about it. I showed up, knocked, and there she was, Eleanor, in a simple black dress that clung to her like it was made for her. Her dark hair pulled back, her eyes catching the dim light of the hallway. "Come in," she said, her voice warm, but with this edge I couldn't place. We moved the furniture, made small talk, laughed about nothing. Felt normal until Jake left and it was just us. She offered me a drink, water, not wine, thank God, because my head was already spinning. We sat in the living room, the house too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you notice every creak, every breath. I was about to leave when she said, "Can you check something in the guest room?" The door sticking. I followed her upstairs, not thinking much of it. The room was small, tidy, with a single lamp casting soft shadows. She stepped inside and I followed. Then I heard the click of the door behind us. My stomach dropped. I turned and there she was, closer than she needed to be. Her eyes searching mine like she was looking for an answer I didn't know I had. And then she said it, "Sleep with me tonight." My world tilted. Her words hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. I stood there rooted to the spot, my mind racing to catch up. Sleep with me tonight. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a plea. It was a statement delivered with a calm that made my skin prickle. Eleanor didn't move, didn't flinch, just watched me. Her gaze steady like she was waiting for me to decide who I was in that moment. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. My throat felt like it was closing. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and erratic, filling the silence she'd left behind. I took a step back, my back brushing against the wall. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Ellen, I started, but my voice cracked, betraying me. She tilted her head just slightly, and there was this flicker in her eyes, amusement. Patience, I couldn't tell. You don't have to say anything yet, she said, her voice low, almost soothing, like she was talking me off a ledge. But I was already falling. My mind was a mess. This was Jake's stepmom. Jake, my best friend, who trusted me to come over to help out to be normal. And here I was locked in a room with a woman who just said something that could unravel everything. I thought about his dad, a quiet guy who always seemed grateful for Eleanor, like she was a gift he didn't deserve. I thought about the life they'd built, the house I was standing in, the pictures on the walls of family vacations I'd never been part of. And I thought about me, 25, lost, barely holding it together, now faced with a choice that felt like a trap I'd walked into blind. But then there was her, Eleanor. The way she stood there, so sure, so unafraid. She wasn't drunk, wasn't desperate. She was deliberate, like she'd weighed every word before letting it out. And that scared me more than anything because it meant she'd thought about this, about me. Long before tonight, I wanted to ask why. Why me? Why now? But the question stuck in my throat, tangled with something else, something I didn't want to name. Because if I'm honest, there was a part of me, a small, reckless part that didn't want to run. That part noticed the way her dress hugged her shoulders, the way her voice seemed to pull me closer even when I didn't move. That part wondered what it would feel like to say yes. I shook my head, trying to clear it. I can't. I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't react, didn't push. She just watched me, her expression unreadable, like she was giving me space to wrestle with myself. And I was wrestling hard. There was guilt, heavy and sharp, cutting through me. Guilt for Jake, for his dad, for the life I was risking just by standing here. But there was something else, too. Something that felt like longing, but not the kind you admit out loud. It was the kind that creeps up on you in quiet moments when you're alone with your thoughts. When you wonder what it would be like to be someone else. Someone who takes what they want without counting the cost. I thought about leaving, just turning, opening the door, and walking out. I could pretend this never happened. Go back to my life. Keep things simple. But her eyes were on me, and they weren't letting go. You're thinking too much, she said, her voice cutting through my spiral. She took a step closer, and I swear I stopped breathing. Not because she was crowding me. She wasn't. But because the air between us felt charged, like a storm about to break. I'm not asking for forever, she said. I'm asking for tonight. My mind screamed at me to say no, to laugh it off, make an excuse, get out. But my body didn't move. I kept thinking about her life, about the way she carried herself, about the things she must have seen and felt to get to this moment. Was she lonely? Was she trapped? Or was this just her? I didn't know. And that not knowing was what kept me there. Caught between fear and curiosity, guilt and want. I wanted to ask her what this meant, what she saw in me, what she was chasing. But I didn't because asking would make it real and I wasn't sure I could handle real. The silence stretched, heavy and unbearable. I could hear the clock ticking downstairs, the faint hum of the house settling. Every second I didn't leave, I was choosing something. I just didn't know what, and she knew it. She didn't push, didn't beg, just stood there letting the weight of her words do the work. I hated how calm she was. I hated how part of me wanted to match that calm, to step into whatever this was and see where it led. But I couldn't shake the image of Jake's face or his dad's, or the life I'd be breaking if I crossed that line. I don't know how long we stood there. Seconds, minutes, an eternity. My mind was a battlefield, every thought at war with the next. I kept seeing flashes of what could happen if I stayed. Her hand brushing mine. The sound of her breath close enough to feel. The weight of a secret we'd both carry forever. And then the other side. Jake's voice laughing over beers last week. Calling me his brother. His dad quiet but kind, offering me a job lead when I was at my lowest. The life they'd built. The one I was standing in the middle of, ready to tear apart. I looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time since she'd spoken. Eleanor wasn't young, not in the way people chase youth, but she was beautiful in a way that felt dangerous. Not because of her looks, though she had those, but because of the way she seemed to know exactly who she was. Her eyes were steady, not wavering, not apologizing. And that scared me because I didn't know who I was. Not really. I was just a guy trying to get by, trying not to screw up too badly, trying to find something that felt like it mattered. And here she was offering me something that could either save me or ruin me. Maybe both. I can't do this, I said finally, my voice rough like I'd been shouting. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. A flicker of disappointment maybe, or understanding. She didn't move closer, didn't try to change my mind. She just nodded, slow and deliberate, like she'd expected it. I know, she said, her voice softer now, almost sad. But you wanted to. For a moment you did. She wasn't wrong. That was the worst part. For a moment, a long, dangerous moment, I'd wanted to say yes. I'd wanted to step into whatever this was. To feel something bigger than the monotony of my days. But wanting and doing aren't the same. And I couldn't cross that line. Not because I was noble or good or strong. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what it would cost. Afraid of who I'd become. Afraid of looking at Jake and knowing I'd betrayed him. She stepped back, her hand resting on the doorknob again. You should go, she said, not unkindly. There was no anger in her voice. No resentment, just a quiet acceptance. Like she'd known this was how it would end. I nodded, my throat tight, and moved toward the door. My hand brushed hers as I reached for the knob, and I froze. It was an accident, barely a touch, but it felt like a spark, like something I'd spend the rest of my life trying to forget. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway, the cool air hitting me like a slap. I didn't look back. Couldn't. I walked downstairs, grabbed my jacket, and left the house without saying another word. The night was cold, the street lights casting long shadows on the pavement. I got in my car, but I didn't start it. I just sat there staring at nothing, my hands shaking. I kept replaying her words, her voice, the way she'd looked at me. I kept wondering what would have happened if I'd stayed. If I'd said yes. If I'd let myself want what I wasn't supposed to want. The days after were a blur. I avoided Jake's house, made excuses when he asked to hang out. I couldn't look at him without feeling like I'd done something wrong. Even though I hadn't. I kept expecting Eleanor to call, to text, to show up somewhere and say something that would pull me back into that moment. But she didn't. She went back to being Jake's stepmom, elegant and untouchable, like nothing had happened. And maybe for her it hadn't. Maybe it was just a moment, a fleeting impulse she'd let slip. But for me it was everything. It was the moment I realized how close I'd come to losing myself. I started questioning everything. Was she unhappy? Was she reaching for something she couldn't find in her life? Or was it me? Did she see something in me I couldn't see? I'd always thought of myself as ordinary, just a guy trying to get through the day. But the way she'd looked at me, the way she'd said those words, made me wonder if I was more than that or less. I didn't know. All I knew was that I'd walked away, but part of me was still in that room, standing in front of her, wondering what could have been. I never told Jake. I never told anyone. It's been months now, and I still carry that night like a weight in my chest. Sometimes I see Eleanor at a barbecue, a family dinner, and she's the same as always, poised, sharp, untouchable. She doesn't look at me any differently, doesn't act like anything happened. But I feel it. Every time our eyes meet, I'm back in that room, hearing the click of the door, feeling the pull of a choice I didn't make. I don't know if I did the right thing. I tell myself I did. That walking away was the only way to keep things from falling apart. But late at night, when I can't sleep, I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed. Would it have been a mistake? Or would it have been something else? Something I'll never know because I was too afraid to find out. That's the thing about choices like that. They don't just end. They linger like a song you can't stop humming, like a memory you can't shake. I'm still figuring out who I am, what I want, what I'm capable of. But that night, that moment, it changed something in me. It made me see how fragile everything is. Friendships, families, the lines we draw to keep ourselves in check. And it made me wonder about her, about what she was chasing, about what it means to want something you're not supposed to have. Have you ever had a moment like that? A moment where you stood at the edge of something forbidden, something that could change everything, and had to decide whether to jump? What would you have done? Walked away or